my MO brothers. Back again for something a little bit more fun and a little bit lighter. I know we've been doing politics and Donald Trump and all the heavy stuff lately, so we're going to get into a little bit of what we call game and something a little bit lighter and something to kind of take our minds off of what's going on in the background. A while back, I was on a blog talk show with Obsidian, and we were talking about black male mating and black female mating. And one of the callers was talking about his relationship with his wife and the things he went through and why he picked her. And I'm not going to really go into details, but when we got to the bottom of it, we found out why he picked her and why he went through what he went through, because she was exceptionally beautiful, on the scale. In fact, he said she was an 8. And he said she didn't bring anything to the table. And we said, of course she brought something to the table because she was an 8. An 8 is actually 10% of the population. And we all know that there's a difference between how men rate the opposite sex, which is fairly standard and fairly common. Most men know the 10 scale. But there's a difference in how women rate men. There are more factors and it's more complex. But these mating factors do make a difference in how men and women are picked. Now, while it's been understood how women are picked or how women are chosen as far as their sexual value, it's a lot different for men. So I decided that we're going to explore this in this episode on BGS Ibmore. So let's start with the standard vertical scale of rating women 1 through 10. Obviously, 10 at the top is stunning, 9 is gorgeous, 8 is beautiful, 7 is pretty, 6 is cute, 5, the nickel or the 5 is plain. That's the average girl. And then we get down to the less than beautiful, which is homely, ugly, hideous, and then at the bottom, the unseen, which is grotesque, the invisible girl. Now, this is the standard scale that most men use as far as rating women or describing a woman to another man. When women actually use the same scale when they describe themselves. I've heard many women that were 5s and 6s call themselves dime pieces. So women are quite aware of the scale, but this is the standard vertical scale, which doesn't mean very much because it doesn't give you a percentage or a number. What's closer to reality is a bell curve. And they've actually done studies where the bell curve is actually closer to the way men see women than the opposite. A bell curve kind of uses standard deviations to break up the population into percentages, where you have the middle of the 5, where the higher percentages actually lie. And then on one side, you have what they call it fat and ugly or fugly. And the other side, spectacular. In other words, the pretty side and, for lack of a better term, the ugly side. And as you get to the opposite ends, it kind of tails off. But it shows you there's a very broad middle, and for the extremes on either side, the percentages go way down. Now, a blogger actually used the standard deviation curve, or the bell curve, to actually split the regions up into 10 parts. And actually give you percentages. Now, they can be a little off here or there, but this is the basis of the next curve. You can see how he splits the percentages up of how much of a percentage in the population of each particular 5, 6, 7, and so forth. Now, this is the bell curve for physical attractiveness, where you can see the 1 through 10 scale. And he's got the tails, which is 3 standard deviations out, tucked back into the 2.5 into the 10. So he combined the 2.5 and the 3s on either side, tucked back into the 1s and the 10s. I think it's a little generous on either side, but this is a good basis to work with. As you can see, your 4, 5, 6, and 7s are like 90% of the weight of the population if it was equally distributed, which it never is, but you can see the percentages of actually getting your dime or even down below being invisible. Now, the charts say that, if you going back from, say, a perfect 10, they say it's less than 2% of the population, which I think is generous. I think that the tens are actually less than 1% of the population, which is like 1 in 1,000. That's been my estimation. But we'll be generous and we'll say 1 out of every 50 or 1 out of every 100 is the 10. And scaling back from that, the 9s will be 1 out of 1 out of every 20, which is the less than 5% of the population. 8s are like the top 10. And then the 7s, by the same token, is like between 15 and 20% of the population. And then you have that broad middle, which is like almost 70% of the populations, which is the 4, 5, and 6s are basically the biggest bulk of the population. And that's pretty much the female scale. Why do I say that? Because we're actually going to use the attractiveness scale for the same thing for the men, as far as an equal distribution. Even though the scale is skewed the way women see men. Women see men actually like the top 20%. So if you're not a 7 and above as far as looks, women put you back into the average or even the ugly bin. Women is either attractive or not attractive. And the 80-20 rule applies, but we'll get into that. Okay, here we go. The elusive male scale. Female attractiveness pretty much is straightforward. It's youth and beauty, which translates into looks and appearance. You might sprinkle in some hard to quantify factors like attitude and personality, but those are very difficult to measure. Because of a man's role in mating and relationships and the role in the family, there are much more qualities that go into attractiveness towards a female. It's actually on a continuum or a continuous scale, which is very difficult to actually put your finger on. So this is one of the best charts that I've ever seen talking about male attractiveness or male sexual market value. And this is done by Donald Graham. Now, Donald Graham deals with a lot of factors that I've gone into in other videos, but this quadrant or this particular diagram that's put on an X and Y scale pretty much hits it on a target, or should I say the nail on the head, no pun intended. Ever since I've seen this scale, I love this scale because this diagram basically gives you an outline of the 4 general types or the 4 general attributes that a man can be in varying degrees according to the woman. It's basically the dialectic along the X and Y axis of the physical alpha, which is the bad boy, and the so-called beta male or the retention values guy that has resources and things like that. But attitude for an alpha and swag for an alpha is hard to quantify. Just like personality and emotional stability is hard to quantify for the beta orbiter. So we're going to do a little remix here. But real quickly, we're going to go over the diagram. Okay, there's 4 general quadrants. We're not going to call them types, but quadrants. The first in the green is mostly invisible. The second is the beta orbiter going to the right, the bad boy, which is the physical alpha, and the ideal man, which is the combination of the two. Now, in common terms, the bad boy versus the good guy, which is the beta orbiter, or opposite poles, and the highly sought after idealized man and the invisible guy, or the non-selected guy, are opposite poles. And the ideal man and the mostly invisible are how much of these two that each has. The ideal man has the best qualities of these two. In fact, you blend these two together, you get the high qualities of both, you get the ideal man. If you want to be the mostly invisible, you'll have little to none of these two. So these two are a result of these two. So the bad boy or the alpha and the beta or the good guy are the two things that I'm going to be focusing on, because it's these qualities that mix up the other, that mix into the other two. These qualities or the lack thereof that mix up the other two. So I was thinking, by looking at the list, and this is particular to black women because this is an IBMOR channel, this is going to be particular to black women, and by the same token, in varying degrees, particular to other races. So I looked at the list of what black women or women in general say they want out of a man, but black women in particular. And I came up with 3 quantifiable qualities of each, of the bad boy and the beta orbiter, or the good guy, or the lame, educated lame, whatever you want to call them. And for the alpha, physical alpha or the bad boy, it's looks, according to the scale, height, for black women in particular, penis size. And I'll be describing these in detail. And for the beta orbiter or the good guy or the lame or whatever you want to call them, which I call retention values, which is income, which is education, and something really simple, which is marriage status and whether you have children or not. With these 6, I think we can come up with a good scale and a good way of basically figuring out how close to the ideal men or ideal man that any man can attain. Also, how rare the perfect ideal man actually is and how few of them there actually are. But we'll get into that. So what I propose to do after we go through what these 6 attributes are and how we're going to actually determine the rank of them, what we're going to do is use the Bell or the normal distribution curve and see what percentage of the population has these particular traits that are desirable, and see at what percentage that any particular guy has in this particular arsenal and how rare they might be to have all of these traits. We're going to do this along the distribution scale, figure out what the percentage is, and we're going to calculate. We're actually going to calculate this and see how plentiful or rare the trait is and the combination of traits actually are. Okay, let's get to the meat and potatoes of this discussion. Let's go back to the beta alpha diagram that we used earlier. And this time we're going to look at the lower right quadrant, which is the bad boy or the physical alpha. Now, previously we listed the attributes of the physical alpha as looks, height, and penis size. So we're going to start rating them and discussing them. So first we're going to look at looks. Since we already had the scale, already discussed that for women, we're going to use that scale first. So most women use the 80-20 rule. So any man below a 7 is not really going to be considered. While I think most women desire an 8, which is the top 10% of the men, I think we're going to be generous and give the women a little break, and we're going to say 7 and above, which is the top 20% of men. So the handsome face, cheekbones, hair, smoothness of skin. Some women like dark-skinned men, some women like light-skinned men. Eye color, some women like dark eyes, some women like light eyes. But regardless, their features would be the top 20% of men. And depending on the region of the world or the taste of the woman, that may vary. But if you took pictures out and put one side by side, most women would put him in the top 20%, regardless of color or looks or whatever. The next factor we're going to visit, which is something that is straightforward, sometimes not as obvious because women don't mention it a lot. Well, they actually do mention it, but it can vary. But most women want a tall man. And the general consensus is over 6 feet. Now at 6 foot, with the standard being 5'10" or 5'9.5", which is the mean or the average, 5'9.5" would be the 5, 5'11" would be the 6, 6 foot would be the 7, which is the top 20%. But when you go over 6 feet, you're getting into the top 15 to 10%. So a man over 6 feet tall, or 6'1" and better, would be ranked as the same as a woman who's an 8. A lot of women don't think of it that way. They just know what they want. So when we say over 6 feet tall, which most women say, or what most women ask for, they're looking for the top 10% of all men. So now that brings us to the last part, or the last factor that's measurable in the alpha male or the bad boy, which is the very elusive penis size. A lot of women will lie and say size doesn't matter. But when you ask or survey women what kind of man they would like and what kind of or size of penis he should have, they always use the figure of 9 inches, which is, for most men, that's very well endowed and also quite rare. But we're going to give women a break on this one. We're not going to make it too bad. We're going to make the standard an inch less. We're going to make it 8. Now, here's a graph of a study done on penis lengths. And I think they studied like 1,200 guys. I can't remember exactly what the actual study was, but this study actually cooperates with other penis length studies that have been done around the world. And the average length of a penis is between 5.5 and 6 inches. And we're going to give the average length of a penis at the 6 mark. So the average length of a penis, a male penis, is 6 inches. So that's the 5, or that's right dead set in the middle. And you can see it almost, not quite, but almost follows the standard curve. It's a little bit more steep than the standard curve, but it's pretty representative. But you can see that for every 1/10 of an inch, it falls off very rapidly. So that by the time you get to 7 inches, you're at the top 20%, which is the 7. Incidentally, it's a 7. I think when you get to the 7, it's the top 20%, 15 to 20%. And when you get above 7.5, you're at the top 10% of all men. By the time you get to 8, you're talking about the top 5%. When you get to 9 and above, you're looking for unicorns. They exist, but they're rare. So that vaunted 9-inch penis that women put on their list, they might as well be looking for millionaires. Now, we're going to use a parimutuel calculation. Now, male angst might have a different perspective on how to calculate these formulas, but we're going to use a parimutuel formula by just multiplying the percentages all together, and we're going to get an odds, a 1 in odds factor. We're going to take 20%, which is 0.2, times 10%, which is 0.1, times another 10%, which is 0.1. And the answer we get is 0.002. Check that, 2 in 1,000 of a percent. So you divide that by 1 by 0.002, and you get 1 in 500 men will have all these attributes. And this is just the alpha phase. So so it shows you what percentage that this particular guy with all these particular features will show up in a population given a normal distribution curve. If we multiply that by the 16.5 million African American men in the United States, we get the number of 33,000 men amongst a population of 16.5 million adult black men. And that's just the alpha features. We're not even talking about the other 3 attributes that women want for their ideal man. And we're going to visit the second half of this in a moment. Okay, now we're going to go to the second half of the components that make up the ideal man, which is the so-called beta orbiter, or the beta male, or in some circles they call them the nice guys. And in the manosphere, they say the nice guys bring resources and stability. But like I say, you can't measure attitude, personality, and things of that nature. So we're going to go with the components of the nice guy, or the beta orbiter, that we can measure. Like we said earlier, the 3 things that we're going to look at that you can readily measure are what? income, intelligence that's measured by education, marital status, and whether the guy has children or not. So this time what we're going to do is take the last one first. It's estimated there are 42% of black males that have never been married and have no children. Now this is important as far as stability because that makes these kind of men almost a blank financial slate. They don't have any ex-wives to pay off or that they owe money to. And also they don't have any baby mama drama or child support following them. So as far as a stable person, as far as measurements go, these two are one of the things that are on a list of a viable single woman. He's unencumbered with his time and with his money. So for the black male, that's a relatively large percentage of men as compared to other men. The next portion that we're going to look at, the next attributes we're going to look at, is something else that can be measured, which is also high on the list of any viable black female, which is income. And what do they all ask for when they're making out a list? They ask for the vaunted six-figure income, which doesn't sound like much until you do what? You start looking at the statistics. And the Bureau of Statistics say that for all Americans of all colors, there's less than 10% of the individuals that actually earn over $100,000 a year. And I've seen figures as low as 7% of all individuals that earn more than $100,000 a year. Now, in the black community, we as a group earn less than 2/3 of the white average. So since we do that, I'm going to take 2/3 off of the white average, which is about 7 or 8%, and I'm going to give the black men that earn over $100,000 about 5%. That seems about right. Now, I've heard it as low as 2%, but I think 5% is about right. So we're going to give black men earning over $100,000 right at 5%. Now, the average black male only earns about $35,000 a year. And I've seen a study, which I can't find right now for the life of me, that black males in America, the total of them that earn over $50,000 is about like 1.8 million, which is a little bit more than 10% of all adult black males. So it stands to reason that only about 5% of that figure, about 5% of the total adult black males would earn over $100,000 a year. But the vaunted $50,000 a year is what it takes to take care of a family, since the average income of a black family is about a little bit higher than $40,000. And the national average income for a household in America is about, I think it's a little higher than $50,000. So if you take those two things into account, to have the national average income for a household and have only one earner, which most women would like, is about $50,000. So you double that to $100,000. That's the gold standard for the ideal black man. And last but not least is the vaunted intelligence question, which is spelled out in education, which is the most hotly contested aspect of the black community. And even though black men out earn all black women by about 10% on average, black women have educations that are about maybe, I think it's like 50% higher than black men. So as far as education, black women do have more and more degrees than black men do. So why I think it's like 23% of black women have degrees, I think the number for black men, I think it's like 16% of all black men. So we're going to use the 16% figure for the educational aspect of the ideal black man in the beta arena. So whipping out the trusty calculator, we have 42%, times 5%, that's 0.05, multiplied by 16%, which is 0.16. We punch it out and we get a 0.00336. And when we do the math, it turns out to be about 1 in 300, which is a little bit better than the alpha. There's a few more resource beta guys out there than there are the alpha traits that women desire. So in the final analysis, we're going to tally up all the attributes from both halves of the equation and see what we get to be that perfect gold standard ideal man. Starting at the top from the alpha, we got looks at 20%. We got height at 10%. We got penis size, and we gave it at 7.5 at 10%. We're going to be generous. From the beta side, or the retention values, we're going to get status, marriage or no kids, at 42%. We're going to get income, which is $100,000 or more, at 5%. We're going to get education at a 4-year degree or better at 16%. We're going to multiply all these things together and see what we get. Punching them in, we get the grand total of 0.0000672. When we do the math, it rounds out to be about 1 in 150,000 of all males, or black males in particular. Now, I ran the numbers twice for this because the first time I looked at it, I believe it, and I still don't quite believe it because this is raw numbers, and we're dealing with percentages or hypothetical percentages because we can't measure every guy. But when we took all these things together, gave the percentages of them all, it turns out that if we apply this to all the adult black males in the United States, and to find that perfect ideal man, that perfect unicorn, it turns out there's only 11. Only 11 guys that fit all these categories. And that's before we take into account the things that we're leaving out, like alpha attitude, or what they call swag, or personality, or emotional stability, or status in the community. All those things that women desire that we've left out, the intangibles that we've left out. We're just talking about things that we can measure and that have a statistical range. So for all you brothers that don't have it all, that don't quite stack up, don't worry about it, because there's a million more guys out there like that don't stack up either. And for all you ladies with that long ass list, talking about a guy needs to have this and have that, if this list is even anything close to the short list that I have, then you might as well go ahead and go down to the nearest service center, take a number, and wait for one of those 11 guys to show up and look at you. I have a feeling it's going to be a very, very long wait. Well, like I said, this is just for fun and just for humor. For the guys out there, don't take anything like this seriously. This is just numbers. And like my algebra teacher used to say, the theory of numbers don't always make sense. But I have a funny feeling this is probably pretty close. And for all you sisters out there that are turning down decent guys, waiting for one of these 11 guys to show up and smile at you, don't get butthurt, because this is just all in fun. And a lot of these things are all relative. But if you see that handsome guy that happens to be a plumber, or happens to be a carpenter, or whatever, or a welder that's making $70,000, $80,000 a year, you better snap him up with the quickness. Stop looking down your nose about him not having any education, because like I said, there's only a couple of million guys in black America that makes over $50,000. So if you see a guy that makes over $50,000, you need to snap him up with the quickness before somebody else jumps on him, including the white women and the Mexican women. I hope you guys have a blast, arguing over the numbers. Like I said, male angst, if you're out there, man, run the numbers for me. Or, one of you computer nerds, man, can do a simulation test on this. It'd be fun to see, plug it into these factors, see what the ideal man would look like. So I know my buddies Obsidian and Rom Wills will get a chuckle out of this one. And Rom, this is for you. And E.T., this is also for you, because you're the one that actually brought it up and inspired this particular segment. But with that, I'm going to sign off. and I'm going to have a good belly laugh after I finish this. This is BGS